Hello and welcome to another episode of the Strettycast. My name is Dale O'Donnell and today I'm delighted to be joined by Brian Murphy and Sean Connolly. This has become my regular panel throughout the season, I hope, as three Irish Reds go through Everton, Manchester United. And there's a lot to get through since we last spoke. Obviously, we have the Richard Arnold meeting up with United fans, and there's been a lot of reaction to that. There's some transfer news, but not so much transfer activity in a sense of incomings and outgoings. We know players that will be leaving in the next few days with their contracts expiring. But before we get to that, speed dating with Richard Arnold. He's quite busy around Cheshire the last few days, meeting people, getting advice and sharing his views. Some of his views have upset people. And some people are giving him credit for it. Just before we dive into it, Sean and Brian, I want to get like a quick kind of summary of your reactions to it a few days on from the event. So Sean, what did you make of Richard Arnold meeting the fans head on that were about to protest at his house?
It's got to be somewhat positive, doesn't it? It's the first time that someone from the board has come in front of the fans in how many years? I mean, it very well could be scripted. It very well could be lip service, but he's come, he's taken his time out, and obviously he's salvaged what could have been a pretty ugly affair on his doorstep. I think you have to give him a bit of credit for it. As to whether or not any of it is actually going to come to fruition is another. I don't know. I mean, I think he deserves a bit of credit in all reality for going and sitting down by himself and speaking with these fellas.
And Brian, your thoughts?
Probably a little bit more conspiracy theorist than my thoughts on this one.
We're going full Joe Rogan here.
Yeah, and going Matt Letizia on this one. No, look, credit to the fella for sitting down with a bunch of lads, 100%. But in my opinion, the only reason he did that was to stop them going to his doorstep. It wasn't because he wanted to speak to him. It wasn't because he felt like he owed him a chat. He felt like he was protecting his own family in his own house from having lads outside the door shouting and roaring and chanting at him. So, yeah, look, behind the scene, or behind all that, regardless of why he did it, I suppose, initially I was as curious as anyone else to see what was said, but how true any of it was remains to be seen.
To echo kind of what both are kind of getting to, I think we have to give credit to someone in Ireland's position for meeting with fans, whether he was forced into doing it, whether he had no other option is kind of besides the point, because football fans of all football clubs will argue that they never get within an inch close to these people to talk to them, to echo how they feel. Again, something you both kind of touched on was that these people were, I suppose, we can't say threatening because behavior wasn't threatening, but they were willing to arrive at his house where his children may have been and his family. Now that has seemingly touched the nerve with you two, because it's not something I can imagine you do, no matter how passionate you are about Manchester United. But is that a step too far? Is that when, you know, we feel so strongly about this football club and the way it's being run, but to show up at someone's house, is that a step too far?
Well, look, I mean, I would just think very, very simplistic about this. I think previous people in his position at the club could very easily just have made a phone call and made sure that people were dispersed from outside his door. It would have been very easy for him to do that as well. I know he's come out and he's avoided the situation, and I'll assume that he has gone and he's calculated what he's doing. But it would have been very easy for him to make a phone call and get the cops down outside the door and just get rid of him. Do I think it's right? Do I think people should come up on his doorstep? Probably not. If in all honesty, if I was in his position, I wouldn't want it happening if I have small children inside in the house. But then at the same time, it's a football club that's been torn asunder, and
yeah, I mean, so it's inevitable. It's inevitable.
It's inevitable, and there's so many people over in Florida. It's not as easy jumping a plane and go outside someone's house in Florida.
I thought, just on what Sean said, Brian, this happened a year or a bit more ago to Ed Woodward at his house. People arrived and thrown some flares. No damage done to property or anything like that. But this has happened before. So when Richard Arnold was taking the job, right, we're going to dive more into what was said in a moment. But when he took that job, he knew the scrutiny that was involved, because ultimately, as someone has been at the club since 2007 and seen the Glazers, what they've done down the years and how they operate, he's very much part of the problem. So the scrutiny should be no surprise. He's very much jumped into that cage of lines, almost. But he's willing to do that because from day one, he's been one of those Glazer shields. And now he's a puppet. And that's what they all are, ultimately. So meeting with the fans is one thing, but Brian, actions speak louder than words.
Yeah, I think Shaun made a good point there a second ago, or raised a good point in regards to the boys of California. Not so easy jump on a plane and protest outside their front door, which are the ones, I'm sure, if any United fan had a choice of who they would approach with a protest or would approach their house even to go that far, would be the Glazers. I think the fact it's more like just circumstance that Richard Arnold is more accessible. So in a way, he's probably head of the food chain at the moment in the accessibility range. That's why they chose to go to his house. Would I have gone to his house myself? I suppose it depends what day of the week it is and what kind of form I'm in, but probably not something I'd have instructed or gone for originally, but I can understand why people do it, of course. Richard Arnold is playing a great fiddle where he's saying, give me a chance, I'm only just in the job. And if you take it in face value, yeah, he is. He's only just after taking over that position and that leadership role and whatever else. But like you said, it's not like he just came out of nowhere and was plucked from obscurity into this role. He's completely innocent and void of any guilt. Richard Arnold's been at that club and has overseen partially in whatever role he's been in previously the Glazer ownership tearing us asunder. So I don't believe Richard Arnold can say, hang on lads, give me a chance, I'm only just in the job. You are just in the job, Richard. But you're also absolutely implicit in what's gone before you because you were part of it. You've been photographed standing arm in arm with the Glazers, smiling, posing with them because they're your buddies. Well, what are you saying? I know you're just in the job in this particular role, but just at the club. It's not like you're guilt-free. So that doesn't wash with me, no.
Sean, something else that occurred is this was an opportunity, obviously, for the fans that were at the meeting to get some dialogue going with the club and to echo their feelings and that. But I guess unfortunately, the footage was recorded and leaked across social media immediately, in a kind of in such a way that I think was attention seeking. That was to draw a lot of followers to one particular account. One of the guys seemed to want to take all the pie to himself, but that didn't help United fans going forward, because ultimately that trust barrier that Arnold may have had after that meeting is gone, because anything he does say now is going to be dripped across social media. Do you think that was in the long run a real kind of shooting herself in the foot?
So I think a lot of these have two answers, and they've an answer that can go either way. I mean, it is pretty snide, I suppose. Look, if you want to take it from the very start, in that let's imagine he's been totally genuine and going there, and it's a bit snide to go and pluck him out of what is already a pretty difficult situation. But then at the same time, the guys that are doing it, for whatever reason they are doing it, for pig iron's sake, that they don't record it, and all they do is move towards social media. You know yourself, the way the internet operates, people are going to turn around and say, lies, nonsense, didn't happen. So maybe in doing it one time, it's proving that this is actually something that is coming to fruition, and that in future sort of scenarios, it's not required.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I just think that was all well and good when they uploaded maybe one short clip. It was when it was like a series of I think 10 videos or so, nearly the whole thing, and apparently they've 20 minutes more worth of footage that one guy said he doesn't want money for, but he certainly knows how to ask for it. Brian, when it comes to the meeting itself, we already mentioned how rare this is to get that close to someone like Arnold and to raise those questions. Back to the question just asked Sean, do you think that's dead in the water now if this happening again?
I think these lads found themselves in a very fortunate position through whatever circumstances. Richard Arnold ended up inside in the pub, sat down with them having a beer. It was an opportunity to build, I suppose trust is one way of putting it, but to build a bit of a relationship moving forward, this could be possibly something done in the future again. I think that's absolutely obliterated by what happened afterwards. It's a missed chance for me. It's a missed opportunity. It was a door open to potential dialogue if it was handled the right way. Which, listening to, like, I watched a few of the clips, and from listening to the way questions were posed and the conversations went, it seemed like it was a very normal, natural, decent discussion between a couple of lads. No one seemed to be acting like a knobhead or anything like that towards them.
Yeah.
But I think that trust barrier. I mean, like you said, one video being put out. Maybe if that video had been released by more so a group situation, it would have been taken a bit better. But like you said, it just looked like one fella jumped on the opportunity and saw his chance to drop this red hot information out.
You see, the other thing too, sorry, Brian, is this kind of all as a result, the 1958 were getting lots of kind of, they were getting the credit for this organizing this event, and as it turned out, they kind of started to kind of push away from it when stuff was revealed there at later dates. But the problem that exists with this and what you're getting at is that this is a group that are relatively unknown, and not just unknown that they're new. United fans know who they are. They know of the 1958, but there's very few people that know who's involved. And when they say that if they came out and they said, we met with Arnold and he said this and that, yeah, people wouldn't believe them. There's a reason for that. But maybe if with that information, they could have done something a lot better with it, or those involved could have done something a lot better with it. And to ensure that it went to the best place possible, because that information could have been useful. That footage could have been very, very useful.
If you're to read and take what's said at face value, which I try to do as most as I can, the 1958 didn't directly cause this meeting, but there were seemingly members of the 1958 involved in it. I think if the situation had transpired a little bit differently, if it had turned out more positively and it didn't kind of blow up in the way that it did, it might have been an opportunity for the 1958 to use that as, look, Richard, a few of our members were involved in that chat with you, and it would open up a dialogue for them if that's what they wanted to do. I don't know if it is or not, but it would have been a door opener for them to maybe continue dialogue with Richard Arnold as the 1958 directly. I think because of the way it transpired and the way it came out and some of the negative reaction to it, it ended up that they actually did have to clarify that we didn't direct this, we didn't lead this, and they had to release a bit of a statement afterwards. Take from that what you will, but I think it's a missed opportunity all around, including for the 1958 themselves.
Yeah, and the other side with them is they're a relatively new group that have got together, unknown as well in their sense of identity. But they will learn as well, with any Manchester United group have learned, is that down the road there's always bumps and places where you have to learn from mistakes. And I'm not saying that they were, just as you said, they didn't organize this, but in terms of like saying claiming involvement in such events, they might be slower to do that in the future because the backlash is massive. And when you're talking Manchester United fan groups, people are always out there trying to knock you and look for reasons to say you're a bunch of frauds or whatever.
Those few boys went out. The aim of having a couple of pints and going protesting. I'm willing to wager a fair amount of money they had no idea that they were going to end up sitting down in the pub talking. Okay, so this was something that absolutely blindsided them. Presented them with an opportunity that not in their wildest dreams they thought they were going to have. Honestly, I think it would have been very difficult to process and to properly ascertain what had happened and the best way of being able to deliver that. I'm not trying to pardon anything that's been done, but it was something that presented to them and they couldn't have possibly thought they were going to have that opportunity. So it was a difficult situation for them to deal with, in fairness.
It's interesting that you touched on that, because when myself and Brian have spoken about this before recording or on the phone, there were moments within that meeting where we questioned, kind of saying, why didn't he do this? So why didn't someone do this? So why didn't they think about this clearer? But that is a valid point, that they went out with the aim to protest at a fella's house, go to the pub for a pint or two before they go out there, and he presents himself at the bar.
The thing I think, like Shaun is saying there, obviously he's nailed it. They didn't expect this to happen. They didn't go up there thinking we're going to end up sitting out Richard Arnold. But as you're saying, the way to process it and the way to deal with it afterwards, I think that opportunity was taken away from them by the instant leaking of information. Whereas instead of sitting back as a group who had met him and processed it themselves and said, right, look, let's sit in this for 24 hours. Let's have a chat about it. Let's see what way we deal with it. One lad just went solo and decided to go rogue, released everything and took it out of their hands. So I think, it kind of took all the chance of dealing with it properly away from them because it just blew up instantly.
Just to refer to part of the conversation that they had, the fans, understandably like ourselves, quite angry about the leaks in the dressing room that we've seen throughout the season. The irony in this, that we had a leak within a small group of fans, that couldn't keep the information to themselves. And I'm not saying they had to withhold that information forever. I'm saying that at least go back to the drawing board, question what should we do with this? What's the best thing we can do with this? And as United fans, come up with a solution. There's not just one lad that deserves to take all the pie, like I alluded to at the start. Just before we move on from the Arnold thing, something I wanted to talk on that kind of, I know, upset people at the club. Quite a few people questioned it with some of his criticisms of previous decisions that have been made at the club. Richard Arnold, like I said, has been at the club since 2007. Has worked with the Glazers very, very closely for that duration of time, and has been trusted now to be the leading puppet of the ship, the modern sinking Titanic, which I call on the blog this week. He has been part of the decision process in so many things at this football club that we angrily joke about. From Phil Jones getting a new contract, from ridiculous transfers that didn't make sense, from Ed Woodward overstepping the mark with managers and saying that we shouldn't get this player and we get this player instead. Richard Arnold, don't be fooled, was as much involved in those decisions as probably Ed Woodward. So he doesn't get the benefit of doubt until we see actions before words. Words are easy. We've seen them, as I alluded to in my column on the blog this week, that after the European Super League, the Glazer, or Joe Glazer, issued a list of promises. You go back to that list, let me know how many of them have been, followed up. There's not many of them. Very fucking few of them. So this is, again, as I described, token gesture until we see evidence. Now, again, giving credit, meeting fans. Ed Woodward didn't do that. Ed Woodward did open up better dialogue with fans through different means of communication after David Gill completely blanked the fold after the takeover, completely ignored fan groups and completely ignored. So we've seen improvements, but we've never quite seen enough. We've never seen the club actually change its way and prioritise football. That's not been achieved. Now, apparently we see change now, but a few months down the line, we'll have a better review of what Richard Arnold is doing at the football club, and not just a meeting at a pub with a few pints, because up until then we haven't really heard much. Lads, also there's a range of transfers we want to talk about. People are looking for updates on Frenkie de Jong 24/7. It's a slow burner. Brian, are you fed up yet of hearing about his name?
Yeah. Move on. Next question.
Shaun, you can tell us more about Frenkie as a midfielder at least. Are you excited about the prospect of bringing him, or is the weight now kind of dwelling on and you're kind of feeling, come on, the excitement now just blown?
The last time that we spoke about this, I was very, very clear. At the time, it sort of seemed like he didn't want to come. It was more so the two clubs trying to make a decision for him that he wasn't keen on. And as I said, and Brian agreed with me, if he doesn't want to come, close the book and move on. Now, it looks entirely different now, because Barcelona put him in a shop window and told pretty much every major European club he was available. The player has reassessed his options, and obviously the prospect of playing with United surely has some bit of an allure still to reunite with a manager who brought him to a position where he was considered one of the hottest properties in European football. I mean, it's very tedious reading day in, day out the same stuff. seeing various individuals who supposedly have all the inner runnings of every football club and every transfer at the end of a WhatsApp message is wearing a bit thin of me. It seems like he's going to come. I'd be dumbfounded if he doesn't come. I mean, they seem to be squabbling about what in modern football is a very, very minuscule amount of money. And I think it's only a matter of time. I mean, he's going to be a fantastic signing if he does arrive. He's going to be easily our best midfielder by a long, long way. And you'd like to think that he's going to be able to sort of have that impact that we hope Pogba was going to have when we brought him back.
The thing that I think is frustrating a lot of people with these transfer rumours is the way in which they're being covered. Now, as someone involved in the media and that speaks to people in the club and asks about these situations and does get updates from time to time, there's a reason in which we don't on the blog come out every week with exclusives saying that United have had a second round of talks with Frenkie de Jong. They've had another meeting with Frenkie de Jong. They've had another meeting with Frenkie de Jong, because there's some things that don't really need to be reported. And then you get to the stage of really fucking dragging out a transfer saga and anger and fans and then fans getting frustrated about how these are taking so long. These are complicated procedures, a lot of them, because every different deal is completely different. Different demands, just completely different. And you can see from reports that Manchester United are meeting very regularly with Barcelona to get this deal over the line. Barcelona have a lot of problems financially, and United are trying to use that to their advantage. Now, with people that are losing patience with this one, right? This transfer is massive because it's United's big one of this window. It's going to have a massive bearing on how much is left to spend on other targets that Ten Hag wants. So Ten Hag has a list of players that he would like to bring to Manchester United. I don't believe at this minute he knows exactly which route he's going down yet until he knows how much they can get de Jong for. And these come down to fine margins. So you look at Jadon Sancho, for example. If United got him the year prior, he would have cost 120 million. Now, the player in which we've got, we spent quite a bit for him, but you'd still say he probably isn't really worth that money. But 120 million, then you're talking even more money. So Manchester United are playing that game because they don't want to be in that situation. And I think, they have to play that game. We're not at this moment in time. They are struggling with the fact that their top targets, if they get the offer to go to a Champions League club, they will probably go there. And that's a tough situation for this club. But another year without the Champions League would even be more detrimental, because I think financially, I don't think the club is set up for it. Because
when we last discussed this, sorry not to interrupt you, when we last discussed this, and specifically when we last discussed Frenkie de Jong, I made the point that I said there a few minutes ago, that if he's not interested, close the book, move on. Brian pretty much jumped alongside me and said, yeah, absolutely. You made a point at that time, Dale, that there's no way, shape or form the club would continue working on trying to buy a player if there wasn't some sort of crystal clear indication that it was going to happen, or that there was a real possibility it was going to happen. So surely when this is taking the length of time that it's taking, they obviously know that it's going to happen. They're obviously only a matter of time away from announcing it.
Yeah, no, United are confident they can get this deal done. Because again, you have to question, why would they be wasting this time on it if there wasn't that sense of confidence? United know the scrutiny that they will face if this doesn't happen. Not only is it Ten Hag's number one target, his first transfer window, you have to back the new manager and so on. But it's terrible PR. And United have been dragged into media storms this summer with Darwin Núñez, for instance. The whole idea that Liverpool beat Manchester United to his signature is absolute crap. And again, it goes back to the kind of reporting that I think United unfairly get, in a sense that the second United open talks with a player, journalists and so many journalists are hopping on those agents for those little minor details. And that little different detail that one agent gives to another journalist is then seen as exclusive breaking news. It might be involved, it might be the same fucking story. But what I'm saying is it's totally dragged out. And I don't see other football clubs get it quite like Manchester United. Really don't. Like, United have met with X amount of players this summer. So someone said to me on Twitter during the week, I don't think United are doing anything. That couldn't be further from the truth. If you ask in my opinion, I think United are meeting with too many players that they know they won't be signing. And I'm not talking about players that are out of their distance, but players that maybe we may have had before. That might be a hint. That one player that they've met with recently, and that I can tell you that they won't be signing, but they're spending time meeting with agents. And you're looking at Frenkie de Jong, and you're looking at the fact there's no one after signing. What are they doing? You know, they're doing stuff, but they're not, you know, getting the fucking job done quite the way they should. Brian, back to you. Another player that United are linked with, Anthony. It's been a while since we've had a right winger at Manchester United. It's been donkey's years, really. Is that a player? Is that a position? Sorry, do you see as a priority for Ten Hag, or do you think he should really just focus on starting that defensive midfield though?
You know, I've kind of come to the stage in my life where the transfer window is starting to wind me up more than it's ever wound me up before. I'm kind of getting tired of nonsense rumours, the 92 players we get linked with every summer, the never-ending saga trying to buy one big name, the couple of kind of weird ones that are thrown in for good measure. Then you've got like Anthony, Timber, half of Ajax, we're getting linked with them. Hands up. Don't watch Ajax. Haven't really watched much of Ajax, bar the odd Champions League game. Can I say anything much about Anthony being this top-class player? No, I've seen a few video montages. Anderson looked like Ronaldinho in a video montage one time. It's not exactly a fair way to relay a player's ability. But right wing, is it a priority? What position isn't a priority at the moment? Is probably a fair way to say it.
The reason why that is the case, by the way, Brian, that you're saying to so many priority positions, because we've left too many positions for too long. Yeah. And what Manchester United have done too, pretty much probably since 2015, maybe a bit before that, is we've signed lots of experienced strikers coming to the end of their career, right? Mm-hmm. And we're kind of putting off that need to sign a centre forward every so often and saying we'll go back to it next year. When we do eventually go to it, we can't because we need to sign a defender or whatever. And I can promise you something that I want to touch on with you, Shaun, about a player that won't be leaving this summer, but I do feel we'll be talking about it in a year's time, is the goalkeeping situation, right? There's a lot of people that believe that Erik Ten Hag and his preference for a goalkeeper could not sit any further away from David De Gea possible, right? So in a year's time, it's not a problem he's going to be able to address now. I can see Manchester United being the market for a goalkeeper. I would be pleasantly surprised if De Gea can show great distribution next season, come off his line and show that he's a modern goalkeeper. I don't believe he can. What are your thoughts on it? Do you think that De Gea will be a problem? And I told you I wanted to speak to you about that after your holidays.
Look, I need a long time to really, really go into this. You know my take on this. I think with De Gea, first and foremost, like you, I would love him to just stay at the club and be a tremendous goalkeeper under the manager. I really would. I love De Gea, and he's there many, many years. But obviously, as I have documented both on paper and through podcast, I feel he's got many, many areas of his game that are lacking. I think he's going to struggle in Ten Hag's system if he brings the type of system that you would expect him to from everything that he's done in his career thus far. I feel it's going to exploit areas and really highlight areas that De Gea has deficiencies in. And I agree with what you said. I do feel in 12, 24 months' time, you're going to be looking at a situation where there is talk of him going and being replaced by probably a goalkeeper that we're not all that familiar with. A younger, cheaper, continental goalkeeper that has ability to be able to play football and not necessarily just prioritise being able to show real saves. Now, I know Brian feels quite strongly about this. Obviously, we all talk quite regularly. I know how Brian feels about the De Gea situation. And I know it's almost gone fashionable, especially on social media, for people to start taking pops at the goalkeeper and putting up these ridiculous montages of him not coming off his line, which personally I do feel is a problem. But like a player being made look like Ronaldinho in a montage, it's very easy to make a player look absolutely brutal in a montage as well.
I'm more worried, Shaun, about the time that it takes to put those together, and the guy that actually has that fucking time.
I know. Look, I mean, to say that De Gea is the worst goalkeeper in the world is just nonsensical, and that's what so many people are doing at the moment. But he is tremendously limited in several aspects of what a modern goalkeeper should be. And I'm speaking about this solely from a tactical point of view, not from some sort of an agenda-laden point of view or anything like that. I'm just solely talking about a modern 21st century goalkeeper. And I do feel he is extremely lacking in several areas, which we've discussed previously.
Brian, lead away there on your feelings on David.
See, I don't disagree at all. I understand 100%, and I've always accepted that De Gea is limited in his ability, and there's certain aspects that he just can't do or just won't do. What might be in my bonnet about this summer is it's more so the way it's been dealt with on social media, where people are outright saying David De Gea is the biggest problem we have at Manchester United right now, which to me is absolute and utter bullshit. Complete nonsense. And it's just, as Shaun said, it's fashionable. It's bollocks. It's bollocksology. Talking through their arse. David De Gea is far from the biggest issue we have at Manchester United right now. We have issues all over the pitch. To limit it to one particular position is nonsense. Our defence is a shambles. Our midfield is in ruins. And our strike force is a 37/38-year-old Ronaldo who can't go on forever, regardless how much everyone might want him to, with no backup. I mean, Jesus H. Christ on a bicycle. How can the goalkeeper be the biggest problem when our defence can't keep the ball away from him? Our midfield can't pass, and our strikers, we've got one striker, and he's 30, he's the same age as myself. I can't play up front. I know he's Ronaldo, but come on, like, Jesus, we need to specify, we need to focus on multiple positions at once. De Gea, can I see him going in 12 months' time? Very likely, yeah, 100%, I could. Is he a modern style goalkeeper? No, he's not. But will we be able to bandage it up for a season with him in goals? 100% we will. Yeah. We need to focus on getting Everton Mills straight first in front of him. Give him a bit more protection. He'll be all right. He'll be grand for another season.
I do feel, I'm not as convinced that he'd be fine. To be honest, I do feel that as we go on this season on this podcast, that it will be an even bigger talking point, because it's just, you're really taking a goalkeeper out of his comfort zone. When people argue De Gea is one of the best in the world, that of course that he could at least try to adapt his style. I'm really not convinced, because you're, like I said, you're taking him out of his comfort zone. He's going to be solely focused on doing these new tasks, these new responsibilities that'll be asked of him, that when it comes to his actual strengths, he won't be as good there either. You know, I just think that, look, like I said, I want to be pleasantly surprised this season by him. He's been a fantastic servant to the football club. Throughout so many bad teams that he's been our goalkeeper, and you look at the league tables and you always kind of wonder how far we'd be down the table if it wasn't for him. But just before we get to the question, something on the transfers that I wanted to touch on, with the links to players with Ajax. I think United have really missed an opportunity in the market, because we've heard all summer that Erik ten Hag, there's several players at Ajax that he'd like to bring. Jurriën Timber, Anthony, Lisandro Martinez. They've been the three that have been kind of mostly linked to United. So the club have had that. Clearly, they understand that they're players that he wants. They've waited until this point. And during this time, we've seen players like Sebastian Haller at Ajax being linked with different clubs. And they've sold other players. So they're not a club, by the way, Ajax, that need to sell. They're not in financial ruin. And they always have players that attract attention around Europe. They sell those players and they make profit. That's how they run. But there's no way they're going to strip their whole squad. And what was always inevitable to happen is they were going to sell one or two more players. And then with the remaining players that were attracting interest, they were going to warn those clubs that you're going to have to pay a premium for these players. I'm talking about Anthony, who Erik ten Hag has gone on record before he left Ajax, speaking about his future, saying that he is the one player that this Ajax team will struggle to replace because they haven't got a replacement coming in to replace him. You know, so they are not going to give him to us on the cheap now. There was talks of 40 million. I always thought that was very, very, it sounded too good to be true. But now, after selling Haller, apparently they want 70 to 80 million euros for his signature. It's a big increase, but that's the position they're in.
The one thing though, Dale, and it's what everybody seems to forget in this conversation. I mean, obviously it's noted that Ajax are a club that sell players. It's their model, bringing new players, sell them for massive profit, rinse, repeat. People seem to forget that they do buy players. Yeah. You know, and all the talk is about the players that are leaving Ajax. No one is talking about the fact that they're today very much likely looking like getting Steven Bergwijn back from Spurs, and they're going to get him at a very, very low price. You know, and this is a player that is going to do absolutely brilliant for them because the league is obviously nothing like the Premier League. Like, they've sold Haller. They're going to bring in another player. Look what Dusan Tadic did for Ajax. And look at his goal contributions that he had in that time period. So I don't think it's as cut and dry as Ajax have sold 2 players. That's it. Now we're ghosts. The figures that we're speaking about previously are going to be inflated. I don't believe that, because they've sold 2 players for huge profit on what they've actually brought them in for.
I just think that the likes of Anthony that have years left in their contract, that Ajax could now just simply say, unless we get a crazy fee for you this summer, you can go next year. Which they've done with other players. And, you know, there's also players there like Jurriën Timber, which, from my understanding, is still very much in 2 minds. Some people are reporting that it's dead in the water. United will not get Jurriën Timber. I don't think that's dead in the water at all yet. I think that if United put in a fee that Ajax like, he'd be on the first flight to Manchester.
I think Van Gaal is doing his best to prevent that happening.
Absolutely. But the point there is that they have some kind of pull factor, Sean, like in a sense that players are happy to stay there. They know that in a year's time, the Bayern Munichs of this world, if they perform well, are going to come knocking because Ajax have that flow. You know, they're not looking at this United deal saying, if I don't get this, this is the end of me. It's my last deal. They don't look at that anymore. So United have to start moving.
Do you know what's really being highlighted, I think, this summer? Now, I know it's still relatively early days in the market, although we'd like to see a bit more action. Is it finally coming home to roost that years and years of poor investment, sentimentality contracts being handed out, and now the lack of Champions League, has it finally hit home that Manchester United just isn't the draw that it once was, which now results in a situation where we're aiming and spending all our time trying to buy one major target with Barcelona, a player who we have to convince him to come. I read a report earlier today which actually contradicts the whole thing of him wanting to come, saying that he's still completely not convinced by it, whether that's true or not. We're trying to get 1 or 2 players from our new manager's ex-club. We're trying to sign Christian Eriksen on a free transfer, who could possibly choose Brentford over us, which makes me laugh. And we failed to sign a kid from Derby who chose Palace because, I suppose, likely for himself he'd get more game time. But if you take the transfer market in its entirety this summer, it's been an absolute shit show. We're not being linked with players that we're going, oh, Jesus, yeah, he'd make a big difference. I mean, there's a couple of players out there who I've looked at over the time and I've gone, I'd love to see us sign him. We're not linked with them. We're linked with a player that's taken us 7 weeks of discussion to try convince him to join us, a player on a free transfer who had quite a big health scare last season, a kid from Derby who we couldn't get over the line, and a couple of ex-players from our manager's last club. I mean, it doesn't excite me. It's not the window I expected. This was what I thought was going to be a key window. I mean, we're going to get rid of 6, 7, 8 players. It's time to clear out the dead wood and a couple of viruses and whatever else you want to call them. And we bring in some key players to solve some key positions. We're now a couple of days away from pre-season training starting. We have nothing done. We don't look like getting anything done today or tomorrow. And then for the final insult in it all, the Glazers are going to take fucking 11 million quid out of the club tomorrow.
Dividends,
it's a nightmare. Yeah, it's a disgrace. The whole window has been a massive slap in the face for anyone with a bit of optimism.
Sean, I think you've made an excellent point. Just before you go on, Dale, I think you made a brilliant point there. With the fact of a decade of underachieving and all the problems that we've had, United have always, under this particular regime, have wanted, it doesn't matter what's happening on the field, we're still a powerhouse and we still have this ability to draw on the marquee signings. Frenkie de Jong, I think, is all the eggs in the basket for that marquee signing. He very much is. Then the club could go tomorrow and buy 5, 6 players, and you might have heard of 2 of them. and the rest of them might be that shrewd signing sort of ideal. But Frenkie de Jong is very much that marquee signing. For sure he is.
Sean, I wanted to get to you before we get to the questions on what Brian said about not being leaked to ex-player, whatever. Do you think that has maybe something to do with the club's handling or want to change the way they're portrayed in the market by maybe trying to clamp down on leaks?
I would hope so. I mean, the leaks they're incredibly. I mean, I don't understand the leaks, and you could offer me a perfectly reasonable solution as to why the leaks come out, and I still won't understand them. I mean, it should be very straightforward to keep your business inside your own doors. So it's I don't know. Look, I share the sentiment what Brian had just said. It is an incredibly frustrating window. It's very, very frustrating. I do feel that, look, there's a certain aspect of it where we don't know the full ideal of what's happening in these transfer talks. And look, there could be more happening. It's being led on, but it is incredibly frustrating. And it's, as I said, I think it's in a situation right now where Frenkie de Jong is all eggs in one basket for that marquee signing, that when it's all said and done, there's 4 or 5 players arriving in the club, and Frenkie is the poster boy of it all, and that despite everything that's happening, we still have this ability to draw these players, and we can still do things in the transfer market that nobody else can. I think that's what we're looking at.
On that one, Sean, though, do you think, is Frenkie de Jong that big? Is he that big a name? Is it really proof of the pudding that we can still draw the, in inverted commas, marquee signings? Is he really that big a name in football that it's proof that Manchester United are still a draw? Or is he just a very good player who needs to find a new club because his own club needs to get rid of him?
No, I get where you're coming from. And you're right, because obviously I do feel like the struggle is real. Obviously there is this sort of marquee issue. I mean, would you class Frenkie de Jong in that superstar sort of category in terms of these marquee superstar players? You probably wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. But in terms of the ability that he has, I mean, you can build a massive project around him. So I think it's maybe, like Dale is sort of saying, I think it's possibly aiming towards that shift in a transfer policy and a shift in an ideal and how we're going to move and going forward. There's no doubt that the dynamic has to totally change, and it has changed because years and years and years of underperformance, years of ridicule. And then looking at, I suppose, even the likes of Jesse Lingard, our own players, how that has gone completely sideways, and his brothers coming out and absolutely ridiculing the club and social media posts. All of this stuff is going to add up, and it's going to affect players' opinions on wanting to come to the club, particularly when Paul Pogba is leaving in the manner that he is.
And the biggest change, I think, the biggest shift we would have expected, I think all of us would have expected this window, is decisive early movement. Let's get in. Let's get our business done. Let's show a statement of intent. We're backing Eric Ten Hag. He wanted these boys. We've gone out. We've done it. We've got them. We're going on pre-season. We've got 2, 3, 4 new players to gel into the club. Give them a proper for pre-season. United are after curing a few problem positions, and we've shown that we mean business. We're now in a situation where, as I said, we're a few days away from pre-season starting. We've got the same squad as last year, minus about 7 players, with nobody coming in. It's a shambles. Like, I mean, I know the shift, we're talking about the shift as in the publicity around transfers. Are people discussing it, or are the club keeping things under wraps? I really fucking hope so. I really hope this is a massive game of charades where the club have 3 or 4 signings lined up that are going to go bang, 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 bang. Fabrizio Romano or Samuel Lucker, so no one knows about it. It's just going to happen.
I'll give you the first question, which comes in from Twitter. It comes in from Round 5 MMA. Do you think Arnold's lunch with Gill is more about getting advice about how to deal with a certain club, i.e. Barcelona?
No,
I
don't. I mean, in a nutshell, no.
How to ignore fans?
I think an amalgamation of a whole lot of different things, as well as an opportunity to have a picture taken.
Mr. Gill, how do you ignore Manchester United fan base? Siri, please. We have another question in from Keane Fraley for you, Brian. How do you assess our fullback situation? Should we be in the market for a fullback this summer?
Luke Shaw has failed to transpire into the player we wanted him to. Don't think he's ever really lived up to the hypes post-injury. He's still a decent left back, but he's not quality. He's not what we need. Alex Telles is the worst footballer I've ever watched play football. Chelsea at home, he hated left back with Cristiano Ronaldo dropped back to cover him because he literally didn't know what planet he was on. So yeah, he needs to go. Right back, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, never liked him from the start, got absolutely lambasted for it. Don't think he's up to it by any means. And Diogo Dalot is a bang average right back who would do grand at Norwich. Don't think he's good enough for Man United. Next.
Right. Shaun, we got a question in from midfield Mastro. What's the realistic expectations for next season? Top 4 and deep into the Europa League.
I mean, there's no reason, if there's any bit of structure put into the side whatsoever, that the group of players can't have a run in the Europa League. I mean, with the best respect, it's the second tier of European football. There's still a squad of absolutely, well, they're supposed to be fantastic footballers. So if they get any bit of structure in there, there's no reason that we can't get top 4 in a run in the Europa League. Maybe a nice run at domestic cup and a nice day out for the boys.
Nice bit of optimism to end the night. Brian, I have a question for you too, or a question for our avid Love Island watcher, fan, whatever you want to call yourself. Does Michael Owen get a hard time, or is he getting an extra hard time at the moment? Because Michael Owen's always got a hard time. He's not a popular figure, but right now it's pretty intense.
It is. Just to clarify, it's as we're recording, I'm 20 minutes late for Love Island. And luckily, I've got a recorder, or I wouldn't speak to you again because it's brilliant. Michael Owen is getting absolutely hammered in social media. When you go to the situation of his family being on television and some of the comments that have been made towards him, they're downright disgusting. If that was my daughter on telly, would I want to be in his position? No, I definitely would not. He's getting some ridiculously vile comments thrown at him. Now, saying that, she probably draws a lot of it on herself because she's not the nicest human being either. But the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it? Michael, who won the league with us, not Liverpool.
That's your weekly roundup of Love Island. Thanks, lads, for joining me this week on the Strettycast. Of course, you can get the Strettycast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anything you're listening to now. You already fucking know, I guess. You can get the weekly roundup or daily roundup of Manchester United news at strettynews.com. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast. We'll be back with more next week.